In this episode, we're going to hear from someone who saw a strange energy field in the middle of the woods. Then we find out what has been eating the beavers out of the traps. Then finally, we venture to a very mysterious place in Idaho. Before we get into the stories, I'm very excited to announce the release of dreadsarmy.com, where I release strange and weird news every single day. I also post all of my stories here too. And if you want to be part of the conversation, join the Facebook group, links below. Now let's get into the stories. Hi there, Donovan. I watch your channel when I can, and I'm really glad I'm finally able to contribute. I've been an avid hiker and an outdoor enthusiast for a long time. I've always wondered if I'd come across anything odd or supernatural. I think I finally have, and I'm wondering what my next step should be. I'm on a countrywide road trip in my decked-out van. I started my journey in California, and I'm ending here in Maine. After this week, I'm going to sell my van to a guy over here on the East Coast and catch a flight to New Zealand. I'm able to finance my travels by exchanging farm help for accommodation. Organic farms are usually short-staffed, and they always need all the extra help they can get. So I volunteer with them in exchange for food and a shower, and maybe a little extra cash. I've done it all, from picking avocados to shearing sheep, to swimming in a cranberry bog. It's a tough lifestyle, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm able to travel all around the world, and I get to meet a ton of cool and interesting people. I've been in Vermont for about 3 weeks now, and I was just getting ready to pack up. My host now is just as cool as the rest. He owns a maple syrup production business and grows sugar maples all on his property. It's in the middle of nowhere and it's about 30 acres, so it's pretty easy to get lost in. The farm is a relatively small operation, but there are a few part-time workers that lend a hand, even on other crops like the pumpkin patch and herb garden. There's no cell service, but there's a landline and a home computer inside that he lets me use. That's where I am now, as I'm writing to you. Maple syrup production is mainly done in the winter and early spring, so my host hires more farm hands in the beginning of the year. It's fall now, so there's not a ton to do, no bottling or boiling the sap, but there's a lot of basic farm tasks that need to be done. We've been trying to set up some new tap lines and have been rebuilding the sugar shack. I've also been tasked with chopping down some of the dead trees on the property and making them into firewood. On this particular day, I was tasked with hauling some cut logs back to the sugar shack. The farm has a really sweet pickup truck that they use to go around the property, so the job was kind of a piece of cake. I really only brought out my axe. Again, there's no cell service out there, so I left my phone in the house. I really wish I brought it, so I could take a picture and show you what I saw. You'll just have to take my word for it though, unfortunately. I was only like 5 minutes into the woods when I started to hear this weird noise. It was like a static hum or a buzzing noise. I thought my ears were just ringing at first from going hunting earlier that week, but it kept on going, and I could tell it just wasn't in my head. I thought maybe it was a plane going by or a strange cricket, but the sound was just too different than anything I've ever heard before. I kept working on the logs and hauling some pieces onto the truck, when curiosity got the best of me. I'll be honest, I didn't really want to investigate, because my host's wife was making pot pies for dinner, and I wanted to get my work done on time. But I just couldn't help myself. It was almost like I was drawn to it or something. I kept walking towards the noise. Luckily, the trees are marked and numbered, so I knew I'd be able to find my way back. The sound kept buzzing louder and louder, almost vibrating in my ears, until I eventually found myself in a clearing. Straight ahead of me was this whitish, bluish light glowing in the middle of the clearing, about 3 feet off of the ground. I could see through it, but there was like some electricity or energy pulsing in it. It was just about 3 feet tall too, and it was shaped like an oval. Around the light were these waves of movement, like heat coming off of the pavement. I was just stuck there staring at it for a minute when I finally snapped out of it. Like any idiot would, I decided to chuck a stick at it. The stick hit the thing and its shape glowed bright white. Then it was gone. But I didn't see the stick hit the ground. It was like it was sucked into it. I decided that was the moment for me to get out of there, so I quickly made my way back to the truck. When I parked back to the house, I told my host and his wife, but neither of them believed me. I convinced them to go with me and check it out, but by the time we got there, it was gone. In the place where it was, however, was a scorch mark. The grass was burnt, like something was lit on fire or poked with a torch. I know this sounds nuts, but I'm telling you the truth. I'm just glad I didn't drive or walk into it by accident. I'm heading out to Maine this week, but I told my host to keep an eye out for anything weird like that. I don't know what this was. Was it a portal or some type of energy field? I have no idea. Hey Donovan, I'm a fan and a frequent listener of your show. I especially like when the stories are about unexplained occurrences and creatures in the woods. I think if anyone spends enough time in the outdoors, they'll eventually come across some strange things that they can't explain. Whenever I sat around a campfire with my uncle as a kid, they'd tell me scary stories about things they saw in the forest. Well, now I have a story of my own to share. Almost everyone in my family owns property on the outskirts of the Finger Lakes National Forest. My backyard juts up against it. The forest sits on a ridge called the Backbone, between Lake Seneca and Lake Cayuga. My family has been hunting and trapping the area for 5 or 6 generations. We joke that the forest is our ancestral lands, because we've been here for so long. In the early spring, I hike up to the peak of the Backbone and set beaver traps along the stream that flowed down into the lakes. My family used to make most of its money on beaver pelts at the turn of the century. Now it's just a hobby for us that has been passed down for generations. I'm actually an accountant by day. I'm sure my great-great-grandparents are horrified. I check my traps early every morning before I head into work. On days that I work from home, I'll sometimes check them again before sunset. Last season, I was walking my trap line before work when I saw some disturbing things. The traps that were triggered all had mostly eaten beaver carcasses in them. Blood, bone, and shredded beaver meat littered the rocks and weeds around the traps. It looked like someone shoved their bodies through a wood chipper. It was a grisly scene, but nothing so far from the ordinary that I should be spooked. Predators getting into your trap line is a regular problem. What did startle me about the situation was the scent left behind, and the damage done to the traps themselves. My traps are heat-treated steel, built for heavy use, but they still had massive gashes and dents in them. No animal, not even a bear, has enough power in its jaws to crumple steel like that. The traps had an oily coating on them that smelled like this rancid meat. At first, I thought it was the beaver carcasses, but the kills were too fresh to smell already. Whatever creature had ransacked my line left behind a distinct smell of musty, rotten meat. I talked to my uncles about the incident, and one of them reported a similar situation: ransacked traps and the smell of rancid meat. His trap line was not far from mine, so it was an easy jump to assume the same animal that destroyed my trap line did the same thing to his. This happened twice more, as we began to joke that a zombie bear was roaming the hills. We laughed about it, but I was starting to get spooked, and I could tell my uncles were too. We decided we needed to figure out what was going on, so we bought a bunch of trail cams and placed them around our traps. They were simple motion-activated cameras that would snap a picture if anything moved inside their field of vision. For a few weeks, we didn't see anything. It wasn't even beaver season anymore, but we kept throwing out traps anyway. I'm not advocating poaching, but we really wanted to find out what this thing was. Finally, one of our cameras caught something. I knew we had something before I even looked at the camera when I saw the ransacked trap. The familiar smell of rotting meat was present, and I found patches of hairy skin hanging from low branches and bushes. It looked like the creature's skin was molting off, like in those nature documentaries when the snakes shed out of their skin. I took the SD card out of the camera and nearly ran the whole way back to my car and sped home to see what was on it. The pictures weren't the best quality, but you could clearly make out a dog wolf-like head, with these eyes glowing in the moonlight. But there was something wrong with the way it was built. It wasn't just that it was way too big to be a dog or a coyote. It had a huge hump on its back, and it was very broad, like human-like shoulders. The camera was black and white, so I couldn't tell what color the creature was. But the picture was clear enough to see that the thick fur around its head and neck thinned out around the body to show light-colored, maybe gray skin underneath. There isn't much else I could tell from the first picture, but a succession of photos taken as the creature moved showed that it could even stand on its hind legs. I thought we had solid proof of a wolf-human hybrid. I sent the pictures to the Fish and Game Commission and the National Forestry Service, and some local news outlets. Nobody took it seriously. The local news was the only one to run the story, but they treated it as more of a joke. I'm not even angry about it, honestly. I'd assume it was just photoshopped or something if I saw the pictures. A park ranger I knew took a look at the pictures and checked out the site of the traps with me, but he said it was probably a black bear with a bad skin infection, like mange, that was making it look and smell like that. But I've since become an expert on bear anatomy after obsessively trying to figure it out, and no bear is built like that creature's I have pictures of. The legs and the shoulders are too human-like. I used to hike and camp a lot in those woods. I still hunt and trap, but I always carry a rifle on me now. I never spend the night in the trees. I have a story to share with you that has been bothering me for almost 5 years now. I live in the rural town of Inwood, Iowa, where everyone knows everyone and loves to gossip. So for obvious reasons, I'd rather not give out my name. I hope that's okay. I turned 16 in the summer of 2017 and got my driver's license. Anyone who's ever been to Inwood would tell you there's not a whole hell of a lot to do there, or really anywhere to go. But having my driver's license at the very least meant that I could get out of the house and off of the farm once in a while. Usually the day would wind up with me picking a bunch of my friends up, and we'd just cruise up and down the dirt roads until the gas light came on, or one of us got a call from our parents to head home. Life in Inwood isn't all that exciting, but it's pretty safe. That's how I wound up in the situation I found myself in the first place. I was driving around that morning just like any other, waiting for my friends to answer their phones, so I could start gathering them up. It was getting near the 4th of July, so the fireworks stands were in full swing, and I thought it would be fun to buy a few and blow some up down by the lake. Unfortunately, though, my friends weren't as enthusiastic and seemed to be sleeping in late, ignoring me and my texts altogether. I didn't want to be at home, though Dad was working on a new irrigation system for the farm, and I knew if I showed my face he'd want me to help. So I got my car and I went for a drive on my own. I decided to head down some country roads I'd never explored before and see what I could find. I knew the little town of Inwood well, but there were all kinds of farms and interesting landmarks. I figured I might as well use my time looking for them. It didn't take me long to run across something I'd never expected. As I came over a steep hill south of town, I laid my eyes on the most beautiful farmscape I'd ever seen. It wasn't a modern farm by any means. There were no signs of tractors or machinery of any kind. It looked exactly like the kind of farmscape you'd see in some turn-of-the-century painting. At the top of the hill sat a huge white house with a wraparound porch. Off to the east side of the house was a giant red barn, and the yard was peppered with chickens out clucking and scratching the ground, and there was a tidy little lush garden laid out in the front lawn. I didn't even notice the old woman standing in the yard until I got right up to the place, and by then it was too late to stop or turn around. It turned out the house was on a dead-end road, and the only hope I had of driving away from it was to come to a stop in the old lady's driveway and turn around. As I came to a stop, she came right up alongside the car and tapped on my window. It would have been impolite not to roll down the window and talk to her. "This is a beautiful car," she said to me, as if she knew who I was. In truth, the car wasn't anything special. It was an old hand-me-down Toyota my parents had given to me with rust along the bumper. I thanked her and started to apologize for driving down her road, explaining that I was just out for a cruise. None of that mattered to her. She seemed thrilled to have me there and insisted that I come inside. Inwood being the polite and safe town that it is, I didn't think twice about it. After all, what else did I have to do that day? Inside the house, everything was immaculately clean, but also old-fashioned. She cut me a slice of fresh baked bread and we sat down at her kitchen table and we talked for a few hours. She had so many interesting stories, but more so, she seemed interested in everything that I had to say. She asked me so many questions about my life and school and friends and my father's farming that I wound up losing track of time. I told her I had to leave, and she asked me if I'd do her one favor and fetch her a pail of water from outside the well before I left. I asked her if she had running water, and she laughed, telling me that she could never afford to have such pipes run. I thought that strange, but I did as she asked and I got her the water. I felt sad leaving her, like I knew she would be lonely once I was gone. So I told her I'd come back the next day and bring my mom. My mom was a friendly lady who loved to help others out. Maybe she even knew a way to get the old woman some water lines. True to my word, I went home that night and told my mom about the old woman I'd met. She was furious with me for being gone all day. But once I told her where I had been, she was eager to meet the lady and see if she could befriend her or offer any help. When we drove out the next day, though, I couldn't explain what we found. The barn was fallen in on itself. The red paint had long worn off through years of hard weather. The beautiful lush garden was overgrown with ragweed and thistle. The fence posts were rotted and falling over. There wasn't an animal on site. The house, too, was run down with pieces of the roof long gone and the windows all busted out. The front door was left wide open. We walked in, careful of the rotted floorboards, and there it was. Right in the middle of the kitchen floor was that pail of water I'd hauled in the day before. Of course, there was no sign of the old woman either. I've driven by that house probably 100 times since, and I've never found the scene that I happened on that first day. There's just no explaining what I saw. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And also check out Lilith Dread. She releases almost every single day. Thanks and take care.